Should the Montgomery County School Board open its meetings to public forum? That's the question one parent asked, and this afternoon the board talked about making a public forum part of the meetings. The issue came up for the first time during last month's meeting when Sue Scott made the request. The board then appointed a committee to study the issue. During this afternoon's meeting, board member Foster Goodwin said the committee is in favor of opening the meetings for public discussion. But he says some restraints should be placed on the speakers. Mrs. Scott thanked the board for its consideration. She says she and other parents have a right to speak and question the board on policies. And she says the communication between the parents and the board will benefit them in making decisions for Montgomery County school children. The issue will come up for a vote during the March school board meeting after committee members have had a chance to put their motion in policy form. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
This battle was anybody's contest right down to the wire. Alabama led most of the game, but never more than 9 points. Mike Davis kept the tide rolling with a game-high 17, many from long range like this one. Auburn wouldn't give up, though, trailing 51-42 with 14 minutes to go. The Tigers outscored Bama 13-3 over the next 3.5 minutes to take the lead when Charles Barkley hit this bucket inside. But when Davis canned the jumper from long range, Bama was back up for good at 65-64. From there, it was a battle at the free throw line. Although both teams shot a miserable percentage from the charity stripe, Alabama hit more down the stretch. And when Ennis Watley sank 2 free throws with 5 seconds left, the Crimson Tide sewed up their 2-point victory.
Well, I don't know if it is a particular key. I thought our ability to rebound some missed free throws that we should have made, but didn't. But we got possession of the ball, helped us a great deal. But I don't know. We just answered every field goal they made and hung in there as best we could, and it was a great victory.
Well, it was a very tough, Rick. We had a chance to win a basketball game 3 or 4 times. We didn't make our free throws, for one thing, hurt us quite badly. Also, we let them rebound some missed free throws that they had, and I thought that hurt us badly.
Super game tonight. It looked like you just couldn't miss from outside.
Well, I think Eames had a lot to do with that. They was kind of guarding him real close. They would give me the open shot. And I happened to put them up. They went in for me tonight. I was in Florida, and I was 0 for 4. And South wasn't going in for me. But I just thank God the shots did go in tonight.
How tough was it dropping 2 real close ball games like that to Alabama?
Well, it was, it took us morale-wise down a little bit, but we realized that we can play with them now. So it's just a matter of time for we can just go out and beat them.
Alabama, still with hopes of tying for the conference championship, will close out the regular season Saturday night at Vanderbilt. But they'll have to get some help from Auburn. The Tigers meet co-leader Tennessee Saturday on the Plains. Reporting from Tuscaloosa, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Number 14, Mike Sanderson. Basketball.
Pork, produce, and beef. These are the culprits leading the food price increase. The survey indicates that the 20 basic food items checked every month rose from an average of $26.78 to $27.14 this month. But there's a little good news amid all this gloom, with some good buys at the dairy counter and steady prices for poultry. The highest prices for food this month can be found in northwest Alabama. While food prices are high, the unemployment picture is even worse. The level in Alabama is at its highest rate since the Great Depression. State Department of Industrial Relations Director Franklin James blames the high figures on the winter weather last month. He says many Alabamians were laid off during that time, and that's when the data was collected. Because of that, James says the level of unemployment may be a little distorted, but all hope isn't lost. James says unemployment claims are down this month, and he predicts the jobless rate will also be down next month. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
A sparse crowd at Huntington College watched the Chargers take their second straight Southern States Conference crown with a blowout of Athens. UAH was led by Randy Jordan, 16 points. That's him scoring on a nice baseline drive. Claude Ford backed up Jordan. He put in 13 on nice ones like that one inside. William Beck and Steve Hedden pace Athens with 10 points apiece. Ricky Oates of UAH got the Outstanding Player Award. He was impressive inside, witnessed by that stuff. An interested spectator tonight's game was AUM coach Larry Chapman. His team plays Athens in a game Saturday to determine the home court advantage in Monday's NAIA playoff game.
We do have to play them Saturday. It would have been a lot more convenient for us and certainly our fans if we could have played them in this game tonight. But, you know, that's the way the reason you play the games because of the uncertainty of the outcome. But we're a lot happier going to Birmingham to play them at Jefferson State Junior College to decide who hosts the first round. Rather than having to go to Athens on Monday to play the first round of the district playoff.
UAH wins the Southern States Conference Tournament with a 72-56 win over Athens State. Reporting from Huntington College, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
The story begins here, at the grave of an infant who was born and died in 1940. In that year, 3,862 infants died in the state before they reached 1 year of age, a death rate almost 30% higher than the national average. Since then, large strides have been made to bring Alabama's infant mortality rate down. The most recent figures for 1980 showed 960 infant deaths in the state, but that's still 20% higher than the national average. The director of the State Health Department's Division of Maternal and Child Health Care and Family Planning, Dr. Beverly Boyd, says several factors combine to produce the high figures. Among them, limited access to quality prenatal care, a general lack of public education about health and nutrition, and poverty. Boyd says the health department tries to fight all these elements through programs designed especially for the needs of expectant mothers, like this maternity clinic at the Montgomery County Health Department.
These programs have played an important part because they have enabled a significant amount of care to be given to mothers and children that I don't think they would have gotten the care if it hadn't been for these programs.
This clinic sees over 100 expectant mothers each week, free of charge. Appointment books here are always filled. Despite all this, Boyd believes clinics like this around the state only reach a small percentage of the women that need prenatal care. And now, Boyd says, federal cutbacks amounting to as much as 43% of previous budgets have forced some clinics to close and all to cut back.
What that really will mean is that we would be able to have about half of the effort that we've been able to develop over the past 10 years. I think that a lot of people will go without care if these programs are not there.
But in Montgomery, there is at least one doctor who doesn't think the closings are all that bad, because he says the clinics are deceiving people about prenatal care and may do more harm than good. More on that in the 10 o'clock report. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. This is the Montgomery Health Department Maternity Clinic, where each week more than 100 expectant mothers receive free prenatal care. Many of the women come here because they don't have enough money to visit a doctor's office or a hospital. They will attend the clinic as many or as few times as they wish before they're due for delivery, then show up at a hospital emergency room where they can get medical care first and worry about the bills later. But that's just one reason a Montgomery obstetrician and gynecologist, Dr. Felix Tankersley, is opposed to the state-run maternity clinics. Tankersley's biggest complaint is that the clinics are, in his words, giving the illusion of obstetric care. Dr. Tankersley has practiced in Montgomery 13 years. He says the state's programs are inadequate, in part because they don't fit into the medical system. Tankersley says each week area doctors on emergency room call receive a list like this one from the health department of expectant mothers likely to show up in the emergency room. It contains little or no information about the patient's general health or medical history. And this is all the doctors have to go by when the women show up for delivery. This list contains 11 names. 5 are teenagers. 1 is only 13 years old.
This is all we get information about these patients prior to seeing them in labor, hemorrhaging.
Tankersley says each time a woman takes an ambulance to the hospital and can't pay for the service, it costs the state Medicaid program $127.
I give my services. Last month, I was responsible for the delivery of 15 patients whom I've never seen before, which is not good obstetrical care. They need to be fit into our program. This is what's wrong with the system.
For now, he says, too many dollars are being wasted by the state in shuffling papers, while the needs of mothers and children go unattended. Tankersley talks a lot about quality health care as being a part of the key to lowering Alabama's infant mortality rate. But tomorrow we'll visit a place where sometimes even the very best care is simply not enough. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. This child is smaller than most newborn babies, though she's several weeks old. She's fighting for her life while doctors, nurses, and machines help in the fight. And even the fact that she has lived this long is a big improvement from 10 years ago when a child like her, born too soon, too small, or with too many medical complications, would almost certainly die. This is the neonatal care unit at Baptist Medical Center in Montgomery. And this is Dr. Rodney Durand, a neonatician who says it is here that he and other doctors and nurses buy time for babies born with medical problems in hopes the infants will get better. It's a difficult job, made more difficult because the center is located in what Durand calls the middle of the black belt of infant mortality. Durand says about 5 to 10% of the babies born in the state this year will be high-risk infants. Of those, only a small percentage will show up at one of the 5 comprehensive neonatal care units in the state. The rest, Durand says, will very likely die. Another neonatician at Baptist, Dr. Prakash Kulkarni, agrees and says even here what can be done for the high-risk infants is limited, and the cost is staggering. An average stay of 21 days can easily cost $15,000. But the center handles as many infants as it can, even though 20% of the parents will never be able to pay their bills. Durand says infant mortality is high in Alabama for many of the same reasons state health officials say it's high: teenage pregnancy, poor nutrition and poor prenatal care, and the fact that babies can't vote.
Nobody's in the government has ever really committed themselves to providing a statewide regional perinatal care system, such as has been done in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, North and South Carolina. These states have all provided great deal of funds to setting up a regional statewide system. And it works.
Why it doesn't work in Alabama and what has been done to make it work are the questions we'll take to the state legislature in the 10 o'clock report. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. It all boils down to the fact that babies can't vote, and that's why politicians aren't worried about infant mortality. That's the opinion of a neonatician at Baptist Medical Center in Montgomery. But State Representative Larry Dixon says it's not true. In 1980, at the urging of several state groups concerned about infant mortality, Dixon authored the Alabama Perinatal Health Act, stating a legislative intent to reduce infant mortality in the state by establishing a program under the state health department to deal specifically with that problem. Since that time, $1.4 million state dollars have been spent on mother and child programs. But there have been problems. Money has been given to the health department only a month at a time because the state committee administering the funds has not been pleased with the small amount of information they were receiving about the programs. Only this month, nearly halfway through the current fiscal year, was the rest of the money given to the health department.
We've already committed $1.4 million, maybe $1.5 million to this effort. Now, how the money's being spent, I don't know. So, you know, if they're saying that the legislature is still at fault because the problem has not been eradicated, I'm saying, why don't they show you what their plan is and what they've done with $1.5 million? Because I gave them the vehicle to travel with. And if they haven't done anything with it, then I'm very disappointed.
But health department officials say this money is just a start. Maternal and Child Health Care Division Director Dr. Beverly Boyd says other states provide much more for mother and child care, like Georgia, where $8.5 million a year goes to reducing the number of infant deaths. Tennessee spends $18 million a year, and Florida puts $31 million a year into combating infant mortality. Boyd says the $1.4 million Alabama has spent over the last 2 years has been used to educate doctors and nurses in the state's smaller towns and rural areas to provide better prenatal care. Though Boyd says her department appreciates the state dollars they receive, it will take many more to make big changes. And with federal cuts really just starting to take their toll on her department, Boyd and other physicians say after 20 years of successful work in bringing the infant mortality rate down and closer to the national average, Alabama may be headed for harder times. It may mean more children dying before their first birthday, more small graves dotting the landscape, more plain concrete slabs bearing only the words, "Our baby." Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Their message was simple: urge free Americans to speak out against Soviet aggression in Poland.
Uniting them together in their faith against the repression of the Soviet Empire. We feel it's very important that people understand that the promises that Marxism-Leninism has been giving to the whole world, especially third world countries, are never fulfilled. A workers' paradise has been promised, but what the result has been a workers' hell.
Group members are also spreading that same message to college students across the nation and are asking people to sign petitions supporting solidarity. They're hoping for 1 million signatures. They plan to give them to President Reagan and urge him to take them with him on his trip to Europe this summer. Leaders say the Soviet Union is afraid Poland will become a crack in the Iron Curtain. They compare the Soviet-Polish situation to a neighborhood with bullies beating up their neighbors. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
One world, one heart. One world, one heart. Can't you hear the trumpet sound?
The members are singing this song as a signal to the Polish people to continue their cause for solidarity. The group wants to let the Poles know they support their solidarity movement and are urging free Americans to speak out against the December 13th martial law crackdown on the Polish government. Group leader Howard Self believes Americans understand what's happening to the people in Eastern Europe.
Most Americans realize that this is another example of communist repression in Poland.
Group members say speaking out against Soviet aggression will be a signal for a renewed hope for those who are not free in Poland and in Eastern Europe. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Since the special election is only just more than a month away, the Republican and the Democratic state parties won't have time to hold a primary election to choose a nominee for that special election. So the Republican and the Democratic parties will nominate a candidate, and each party has said they'll let the local committee handle that nomination. Tomorrow, the Montgomery County Democratic Party will hold a public hearing at the Capitol where they'll interview interested parties. So far, 7 have reportedly expressed some interest, but the party won't say who they are. 2 people, though, will admit they're interested. One is Representative Larry Dixon, who now holds a House seat in Montgomery. Another who won't deny interest is former U.S. Attorney Barry Teague. As for the Republicans, no meeting has been planned by the local committee, but there have been several names that have been mentioned. Bill Joseph, currently a county commissioner, says he's been approached about running for the seat, but he says he hasn't made up his mind. Another name mentioned is Montgomery City Councilwoman Elise Reynolds. Whoever gets the party nominations and later wins the special election will only serve in that seat through the end of the year when that Senate seat term expires. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The group calls itself Concerned Citizens for the Blue Law. The man leading the fight is the Reverend Jimmy Fikes, pastor of Opelika's Airview Baptist Church. Reverend Fikes says large discount stores are the main violators of the blue laws. He says the stores are clearly violating the law and are getting away with it because law enforcement agencies refuse to enforce the outdated code, which they say is too vague. Reverend Fikes says his group, consisting of Auburn and Opelika citizens and numerous other churches, plan to organize a political action committee and try to get the blue law revised through the legislative process. In the meantime, Fikes says his organization is not standing by idly.
You have to consider, first of all, that the law enforcement people won't enforce the blue law. So it means that we, as citizens, will have to go to the chief of police office in Auburn or Opelika, either one. It looks like it's going to be Auburn first. And we will have to sign out a warrant of arrest against any store manager who opens that store, and that will be done this weekend.
Reverend Fikes says he and his group will do whatever it takes, for as long as it takes, to keep the stores that are violating the blue laws closed on Sunday. From Opelika, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The drug bust took place shortly after daybreak at 624 Columbia Street. Although the case was made by Montgomery Police, sheriff's deputies and state trooper narcotics agents also took part in the bust. Sergeant D.K. Welch with the Vice and Narcotics Bureau of the Montgomery Police Department says they recovered a large quantity of Talwin, which is an illegal drug used as a heroin substitute. Arrested in the case are 31-year-old Josephine Smith of 624 Columbia Street. She's charged with illegal possession of drugs and had 2 other outstanding warrants filed against her. And 30-year-old Chester Smith of Birmingham. He's also charged with illegal possession of drugs. Miss Smith is being held on $11,000 bond. No bond has been set so far on Chester Smith. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News. The drug bust took place at 624 Columbia Avenue shortly after daybreak. Montgomery police were assisted in the search by Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies and agents with the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Detective Sergeant Lewis Kelly says officers recovered a large quantity of Talwin tablets, which are used as a heroin substitute. Authorities say the drugs taken from the apartment are valued in excess of $1,000. Sergeant Kelly says 31-year-old Josephine Smith of Columbia Avenue and 30-year-old Chester Smith of Birmingham were both charged with illegal possession of drugs.
Chester Smith is under a $7,500 bond at this time, and Josephine Smith is being held under the normal
bond for possession of Title I and 2 other charges pending against her for failure to appear in court, which is prostitution and possession of marijuana.
Officials say that today's raid is part of an overall effort to crack down on suspected Title I dealers in Montgomery. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Mrs. Schlafly says the Supreme Court has handed down some unpopular decisions in the areas of busing, prayer in the schools, pornography, internal security, and abortion. She says in all these areas, the justices have created new laws when it's not their function to do so.
The short-term solution is withdrawing jurisdiction from the federal courts over those areas where we may not trust the discretion and the restraint of the judiciary. And the long-term solution is to remove life tenure, which is, I think, like Samson's hair, the source of their power.
Mrs. Schlafly says it's all right to appoint the justices, but says each should come up for election after serving a certain amount of time. She says life term isn't given to state judges, and she cites it to support her idea that life tenure is not essential in providing good judges. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Last season was a Jekyll and Hyde kind of year for Alabama baseball. The Crimson Tide posted their first ever 40-win season, established a national ranking, and tied for the Southeastern Conference Western Division crown with Mississippi State. But come tournament time, the noisy Bama Bats grew silent, and the Tide had a disappointing fourth-place finish in the SEC playoffs, and they failed to receive a bid to the coveted College World Series. Of course, Alabama's hoping for bigger and better things this season, but the losses are heavy. Gone are 6 starters and 4 of last season's top 5 pitchers. Tide coach Barry Schallenberger says that his team has great potential, but he says several things must fall into place.
I'll tell you what, this team probably I know less about than any team I've ever coached, in the sense that we have some experienced kids, but kids that really haven't played regularly at the SEC level. Pretty hard to tell when you're playing inter-squad games exactly how a bunch like that is going to act when they get into tough competition, but we'll find out real quick this weekend.
What are going to be your strong points and weak points?
I think our strong points, I think we'll swing the bats pretty good. We've got a solid lineup 1 through 9 in the batting order. I think our weak spots are going to be on the mound and behind the plate, and I'll tell you, that's not a very good place to begin.
This baseball season gets underway for Alabama this weekend with a 2-game home series against perennial power South Alabama. They play single games Saturday and Sunday beginning at 2 p.m. at Sewell Thomas Field. Reporting from Tuscaloosa, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Mrs. Schlafly says the purpose of the Supreme Court is to determine if laws are constitutional. She says the High Court has been creating new laws in areas like busing, prayer in the schools, pornography, and abortion.
The short-term solution is withdrawing jurisdiction from the federal courts over those areas where we may not trust the discretion and the restraint of the judiciary. And the long-term solution is to remove life tenure, which is, I think, like Samson's hair, the source of their power.
Mrs. Schlafly says it's all right to appoint the justices, but they should come up for election at a later date. She says her group will also work in education to make sure that the proper reading methods and materials are being used in the schools. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The visiting Bulls cooled off the red-hot Hawks with a great fourth-quarter comeback. Atlanta had built as much as a 13-point lead, mostly behind the scoring of Eddie Johnson and John Drew. Johnson connects there from way out. The former Auburn star led all scorers with 27. Drew added 23, 2 on that bomb. But Reggie Theus of the Bulls threw in 21 second-half points, including this follow-up at the buzzer, to finally tie the game and send it into overtime. In the OT, the Bulls took the lead for good. Big Artis Gilmore hits this jump hook, making it 112-110. Ricky Sobers then added a pair of free throws, and this layup at the gun, the final, Chicago 116, Atlanta 110. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Here is the basic question. Should employees in Here is the basic question. Should employees injured on the job who are covered by workmen's compensation be allowed to sue their fellow employees? Amendment number 4 says no. It says that workers would be prohibited from suing their fellow employees even if the injury was due to negligence. According to the wording of the amendment, co-employee means company officers, supervisors, safety inspectors, and agents of insurance companies. Those opposed to the amendment say that it takes away workers' constitutional rights to due process of law. Those who are supporting the amendment say it will give Alabama more jobs and fewer lawsuits. They say it will give workers protection from unnecessary, expensive lawsuits. Those against the amendment are saying removing the liability from safety inspectors and insurance companies puts the safety of some working men and women in question. But supporters of the amendment claim that many businessmen can be put in a near ruinous position by the threat of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, even while they are already required to pay for workmen's compensation insurance. The media and in-person campaigns are intense. Business interests like Alabama Power Company are handing out leaflets, the cost of which they tell us will not be passed on to the consumer. These leaflets are urging their workers to vote for the amendment. Governor James is for the amendment, calling it fair and necessary. Earlier this week, he quoted a letter from a Birmingham law firm, which he said spoke for 3 major unions in the state who support the ban on co-employee suits. But on the other side, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers called a rally here today to try and convince their members to vote against the measure. They're concerned over big business and industrial interests taking away the workers' right to sue. And there are predictions that the media blitz will intensify in these last 3 days, leading to Tuesday's voting. The real test of the bill comes then. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.
New Orleans, Las Vegas, or even maybe to Mobile, Alabama. 2 or 3 times a year and get rid of that $12,000. You would have to make. There's been much demagoguery about it. There's even an ad that says the constitutional rights of working men and women will be taken away if that passes. That is propaganda and an outright lie by a certain segment of trial lawyers in this state, period. And I might as well call it and tell it exactly like it is, and that's what you got. A farm, a tractor, and a harrow. I'm going to buy real assets.
State Democratic Executive Committee member Ron Creel held a public forum in the Senate chambers of the Capitol this morning. He read from a list of 11 names of persons who expressed interest in the District 27 Senate seat, but only 2 of the 11 mentioned were present. Pat Harris, assistant to Alabama Supreme Court Justice Bo Torbert, and former U.S. Attorney Barry Teague. Representative Larry Dixon's name was on the list, but he was out of town and unable to attend the forum. Attorney Julian McPhillips' name was on the list as well. However, he neither was present. Montgomery attorney Reggie Sorrell's name was not among the others on the list of applicants, but he too stepped forward to express an interest in the Senate seat, as did Harrison Teague. After each of the applicants addressed the committee, Teague received a unanimous recommendation. The State Democratic Party will be accepting nominations until March 4th, when ballots will be sent to committee members for the purpose of electing a nominee March 10th. The special election to fill the vacant seat will be in April. In the meantime, Republicans must also choose a nominee. From the Capitol, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Sergeant V.H. Hicks of the Montgomery Police Department's Robbery Homicide Bureau says all 3 infant deaths are thought to be murders. All he will say about the 2 new investigations is that they involve children killed in the city within the past month. Hicks says those murders are not believed to be in any way connected to the death of a newborn infant found dead last week in a load of trash from Alabama State University. As for that investigation, Hicks says it's going well.
We do have 1 or 2 leads at this time that I'm not at liberty to elaborate on that are looking fairly good right now. It's just going to take time. It's a time-consuming case. Any homicide like this, it just takes time to work.
Hicks says so far the investigation of the death of the 6-pound black male baby has carried police officers as far as Selma chasing leads. Hicks says the officers heading up the investigation, Corporal R.T. Ward and Investigator S.W. Ingram, have talked to over 1,000 students at Alabama State and have been working day and night trying to find the mother of the child. Though the emphasis of the investigation is still on the university, Hicks says leads all over the city are being checked. Meanwhile, the baby was buried this week in a pauper's grave. There was no funeral. There were no mourners. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
We were here about 8,000 or 9,000 strong to start. I said, oh, Lord, they won't come back. But they did, and they were beautiful, and Alvin Mumford was beautiful. The whole team, it was a great victory.
Well, with the time barrier, I believe that was one effect to it because we was all fouled up the first go-round, so we had to refoul ourselves up.
But in the last 2 games, we failed to be able to complete the place at the end to win the games. But I'm so proud of this team. You know, this is a co-championship team, and that's all that matters. We're going to end up in first place, and this team was not picked to finish any higher than 5th.
Early on, it looked as though it might be a Kentucky blowout. The Wildcats jumped out to an 8-point lead when Dirk Minifield converts here from the top of the key. But turnovers would then lead to the Wildcats' downfall. When Leonard Mitchell steals a pass by Minifield and feeds Derek Taylor for the layup, the Tigers took the lead for good at 24-23. That led LSU to 19 straight points. Howard High C. Carter was red hot, 2 of his game-high 29 on this 20-footer. LSU had an incredible 45-26 halftime lead, and the onslaught didn't stop in the second half. Taylor backed Carter with 24. He connects here with an 8-footer. When Stephon Johnson scores inside, the Tigers had their biggest lead at 75-40. Derek Hort's 24 points led Kentucky, but 31 turnovers would nail the Big Blue coffin. The final from Baton Rouge, LSU 94, Kentucky 78.
Do you think knowing the outcome of the LSU-Kentucky game will help your team any?
Well, our team controls its own destiny. We got to win tonight to share the conference championship.
What you going to do, Coach?
Well, our plane is set up to go back at 5 o'clock.
NBC now brings you this special report. Here is NBC correspondent Kenley Jones.
Wayne Williams has been found guilty of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of life in prison. The jury deliberated a total of about 11 hours before returning its verdict. Williams was asked if he had anything to say before sentence was passed. He said, "I have maintained my innocence all along, and I'll still say so today." He said he has no malice toward the jury or the prosecutors or the court. He told Judge Clarence Cooper, "I hope the person or persons who committed these crimes will be brought to justice." His last words before he was led away to jail were, "I did not do it." Once again, after a 9-week trial, Wayne Williams has been found guilty of 2 counts of murder and sentenced to 2 terms of life in prison. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Atlanta.
This has been a special report from NBC News.
Wayne, how do you feel? Wayne Williams flashed the victory sign as he left for the courthouse this morning to wait for word on the jury's deliberations. He did not have long to wait. After a total of 11 hours of deliberation, after a trial that lasted 9 weeks, the jury sent word that it had reached a verdict. The foreperson handed the verdict to District Attorney Lewis Slayton, who read it aloud. On count 1, the murder of 21-year-old Jimmy Ray Payne, guilty. On count 2, the murder of 27-year-old Nathaniel Cater, guilty. Judge Clarence Cooper sentenced Williams to 2 consecutive terms of life in prison, the maximum sentence he could be given. Williams was asked if he had anything to say before sentence was passed. He said, "I have maintained my innocence all along, and I'll still say so today." His last words before he was led away to jail were, "I did not do it." Defense counsel Alvin Binder.
I'm sure there'll be an appeal.
Will you be representing Wayne Williams in an appeal?
I don't know that yet, though.
District Attorney Slayton.
I feel confident that the case will stand appellate review. We have tried it carefully with that in mind throughout.
Williams was charged with 2 murders, but evidence was introduced during the trial that linked him with 10 additional murders. That means at least 12 of the 28 murders of young blacks, which took place in Atlanta over a period of almost 2 years, can now be closed. Once again, Wayne Williams has been found guilty on 2 counts of murder and sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of life in prison. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Atlanta.
The speech is titled Anatomy of a Cover-Up. The anatomy belongs to the nation's media, newspapers, magazines, radio, and television. And the cover-up, according to Fatherly, is designed to limit information available to the public about our government. The ultimate goal? Undermining national independence to form a new world government. Fatherly spoke this week to a group of about 150 people in Montgomery and told them the media are not the enemy, but a select few people who allegedly manipulate media coverage are. Fatherly staged something of a media show himself, using newspapers, magazines, recorded radio broadcasts, and quotes from television newscasters to back up his argument that the media are managed and manipulated by, among others, the Trilateral Commission and the Federal Council on Foreign Relations. But if the speech was against much of the news coverage being offered the nation, it was decidedly for at least one group offering its own coverage of world news.
Having spent 25 years in broadcasting and advertising, I'm telling you on the record that you're missing a tremendous amount of information if you are not yet on the receiving end of this information. But you can get that information through the John Birch Society.
Fatherly is a member of the John Birch Society. The motto of the society is less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. And judging from the audience response to the hour-and-a-half-long presentation, many of them share the sentiments of Fatherly, making it clear they too want to see at least greater responsibility, if not greater morality, by the nation's media. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The penalty for willful failure to register is a penalty of up to 5 years and up to a $10,000 fine. Now, of course, what we're interested in is compliance. We're not out to prosecute merely for the sake of prosecution. We'd like for people to go and register. They're required to by law. We'd ask them to, and for those who won't, we will prosecute.
Over 1 million tourists stop by one of 5 Alabama welcome centers each year, some to get refreshed, some to get informed. And now tourists can come here to get a hotel reservation.
We've just started making reservations with the state if you'd like to look through this and take your preference.
Thank you.
Any of these?
They'll even map out the path to the front door for you.
At first they had complaints, especially in the larger cities, Mobile and Montgomery, places like this where conventions are held. People could not get rooms. So instead we have designed this system to where you can be in Montgomery at the Welcome Center there and make reservations for the next 3 nights in Mobile without having to be there personally and do it at no extra charge, and you do not have to worry with, making any of the reservations yourself.
With the new service, everybody gets a piece of the action. Hotels get more business. Cities get more money through the lodging tax. And 1% of that trickles down to the Alabama Bureau of Publicity and Information. But they say they're using the program mainly to show off some of that good old Southern hospitality.
Accompanied by 2 members of his Concerned Citizens group, the Reverend Fikes arrived at Opelika Police Headquarters just after 1 p.m. Once inside, he filed legal complaints against Winn-Dixie Food Store, Lawler Mobile Homes, Lowe's Building Supply, and the Family Dollar Store. Opelika Police Chief Ron Dunson assisted in filling out the reports, which upon completion were signed by Reverend Fikes. Chief Dunson says he will enforce the blue laws if city commissioners order him to do so.
We will only enforce it by warrant, unless directed to do so by the Board of Commissioners for the city of Opelika. But, you know, any citizen naturally has a warrant or has a right to sign a warrant when they have probable cause to believe that an offense has been committed. And that's what is occurring at this time. Well, the complaints have been filed, and we will determine, you know, whether there is probable cause or not for a warrant. And then they will appear before the judge, and if the judge feels like it's probable cause, then he may or may not issue a warrant. You know, it would be a judicial decision and not a decision by law enforcement agency.
Moments later, Reverend Fikes commented on the action taken.
And the reason we made more than one complaint was in order to demonstrate to the court that we're not singling out any company, that we want this to be a statewide law that's enforced.
Opelika police officers immediately delivered the signed complaints to all 4 of the Opelika businesses. We spoke with the managers of each. However, none would comment on or off camera. Meanwhile, Reverend Fikes says he intends to file similar complaints in Auburn tomorrow. From Opelika, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Which had been taken during the robbery. The white male was described as being 17 to 18 years old, wearing a black t-shirt with wings on the back. The house had been ransacked and realized that someone was still in the house. After he had crossed the street in order to notify the neighborhood has been canvassed, everyone's spoken with. We've talked with school officials about subjects that have been absent from school on that day. We've also talked with people in the motorcycle sales business because we felt like the shirt might have been an advertisement for some brand motorcycle in the city of Montgomery. The subject did threaten the victim with a rifle. For that reason, we're attempting to locate him before he does hurt someone. We're asking that anyone with any information in regards to this suspect please notify the Montgomery Police Department Crimes Against Property section.
DePaul read the nation's longest winning streak to 21 games with their whipping of the Irish. Terry Cummings was the big man for the Blue Demons. He scores 2 of his game-high 28 on this tip-in, which put DePaul on top for good at 20-19. The Demons led by 6 at half and ran it out to as much as 17. Cummings made it 60-43 on that inside bucket. Notre Dame tried to fight back. John Paxson leading the way with 21. His jumper here cut the DePaul lead to 70-61. But that would be as close as the Irish could get. DePaul wins at 81-69. Notre Dame, suffering their worst season since the early 60s, now falls to 8-16. Coming into today's game, Virginia Commonwealth was looking for their 3rd straight Sun Belt Conference championship. The game was close throughout most of the first half, but when Donnie Spear came off Gene Bartow's bench to score 6 straight punts, that opened a comfortable Blazer lead. Spear gets 2 of his 18 here on this turnaround jumper. The Rams managed to cut it to 3 in the second half behind the efforts of Monty Knight, 2 of his game-high 29 coming here on this jumper from the top of the key. But Oliver Robinson helped widen the UAB lead to as much as 14. The tournament MVP converts this 18-footer into a 3-point play. Robinson led the Blazers with 24 as UAB won it going away 94-83 to win their first ever Sun Belt Conference championship. They now look to the NCAA tournament.
Shaw County water system. I don't know if they have anything in Montgomery County other than this, whether they will have.
Krebs says economic crimes like fraud, bribery, and dope peddling should run in excess of $250 billion in the United States by the year 1990. FBI figures show organized crime 2 years ago was a $150 billion a year business, making it the second most profitable business in America, behind the oil and gas industry, which netted $360 billion in 1980. Well, what does this expensive business operation mean to you and me?
For every man, woman, and child in the state of Alabama in the year 1980, we paid $800 to swindlers and organized criminals. What it means to you is there is a 15% surcharge on all consumer items, whether it's jewelry, automobiles, or what have you, occasioned as a result of these losses.
Krebs released another frightening figure. He says in the next 10 years, nearly every household can expect to be victimized by some type of violent crime. And now, Krebs says there's a problem with fighting crime. Law enforcement agencies like the FBI and IRS are suffering from federal budget cuts. And Krebs says the crime outlook won't get any better unless citizens band together to fight crime. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Opposing a particular issue. Does the legal staff here have any knowledge of it? Well, since we can't take anything with the utility company, we would stand up to the company if they were trying to charge the ratepayers or put the company on notice publicly at this time. But I, for one, am going to be encouraging our staff to.
If the attempt to do this is made, then there should be some kind of punitive action taken.
The Senate is expected to take up debate of the state's general fund budget. The Senate committee version of this bill has been changed to help education forces win their fight to fund a 16% rather than 14% teacher pay hike. More than $17 million worth of quasi-educational programs have been pulled from the education budget and put in the general fund budget. This made room in the education budget for the larger increases in salaries. But in order to fit those programs in the general fund, millions of dollars were cut from the Departments of Health, Mental Health, and Prisons. The Senate debate tomorrow will be whether the full Senate agrees with the Senate committee changes. Over in the House, debate will be on the education budget. House leaders will be trying to preserve the version of the budgets that they've introduced, which provide for a 14% teacher pay raise. But education forces are geared up with a stack of amendments to cut some programs out and make room for the larger increases. Education forces are also expected to argue that more money from a reduced retirement cost can be used for the larger teacher pay raises. But many of the House leaders say that money needs to be used for increased benefits for retired teachers and state employees. One group, they say, has not been properly addressed so far this year. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Oh, yeah.
When you talking about 45 on this, it's going to be tore out.
Oh, well, you
If we go across the street.
2,000 for 2 weeks.
The commissioner's concern resulted from a written complaint by former PSC Commissioner Jim Ziegler, who accuses Alabama Power of conducting a political campaign in support of Amendment 4. He says the company is spending money from the consumers who pay monthly power bills. Meanwhile, PSC President Billy Joe Capp says the commission intends to investigate the matter.
It will just be a sad day when a regulated company can expense unlimited amounts in a political issue to their ratepayers, and the ratepayers having no choice except to pay it. And what the commissioners did today was collectively state that we're going to look into this thoroughly, and if the company has caused any expenses to be put upon the ratepayers, we're going to ask them to refund that money to the ratepayers, and we will also consider and perhaps levy, I would hope that we would, if they are guilty of this, a punitive fine to be refunded in addition to the actual expense.